so much. So I just want to welcome you. You know, there's a beautiful exhibition going on. If everybody hasn't seen it yet, the Mars Artistic Mission Exploration. Give me a little tongue tied here. Today we're going to talk about that intersection between art and technology. And so, you know, I want to start and I want to ask each of our panelists, like, what led them to do what they do and work in the fields that they have. And so let me start with Dr. Laura Danley. Now, tell us how you got started and how.
Bill's mute button is on.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I think I was born to it. I from my earliest memory, I mean, here's the truth. I was conceived the week that Sputnik was launched. I'm really a Sputnik baby, and born the day that Congress passed the legislation to create NASA. So there's a perfect gestation there, and I was of that age, and space all the way for me.
Okay, so. John, tell us how you got your start. What made you interested in space in the beginning? What was the thing that got you?
Well, following Laura's lead, I think I too was born to it. I've always been curious. I've always wondered what makes things work, what's smaller than an atom, what's out beyond the stars. And they often say that events that happen when you're about 10 determine whether you might consider a technical career. Well, when I was 10, and you can do the math, Neil Armstrong walked on the moon. And so I think it's only natural that I ended up where I am.
Wonderful. Well, we're glad to have you. And now, William, tell us how you got your start. I mean, you have such a long history in art and science and movies and television and things. Tell us
I'll try to make it short. I was always interested in science and math. I was a science math major all through high school until my very, very last semester in high school. I was my first year of high school was at Reseda High. Got a great education there. Then my family moved to Ventura County, and I went to Thousand Oaks High, and I got a horrible education. And I used to be penalized. I used to get detention for skipping the pep rallies and going to the library and trying to educate myself. They would punish me for that. So I thought, man, I'm going to get into med school. I'm going to be 2 years behind everybody else. So I better come up with a plan B. Plan B was to be an artist. I've been drawing all my life. And because of my...
Oh, we might have lost William there for a second. Let's see.
Any university I wanted to go to in the United States. So my friends thought I was nuts. They said, you could go to Harvard, you could go to Yale, you're going to use your skull. So because of that, when I started doing paleontological reconstructions, I didn't have the trouble that most artists have with reading the scientific papers. They were actually incredibly beneficial. And I learned a lot by doing all the scientific research as well.
Well, thank you. You know, and Dr. Laura and John are also artists themselves, I believe. So John has a piece in the art exhibition, and it was in the little slideshow we showed earlier. So thank you, John. So why don't we get right into the meat of it? And Laura, do you want to tell us a little bit about the history of science and space and art? And I believe you have some things you want to share.
I do. Thanks. And I should say I'm not an artist yet, but as Peter Adams knows, I've been waiting for retirement to take up painting, and retirement. I just retired from Griffith Observatory. So once this pandemic is over, you guys are going to see a lot more of me, and I'm going to start taking some classes. I very much look forward to that, by the way. When we discussed the planning for this meeting, I was asked to give a little context about art and science, and particularly in astronomy. And so I have put together a brief overview that I'm actually going to focus, it's probably the wrong thing to do, but focus on breadth rather than depth, just to give a sense of how art and science have been inextricably linked from the very beginning of human exploration, human endeavor, and human expression. It's really an artificial idea that they're separate, and I think is brought on by some preconceptions and some misconceptions. And I hope to explore a little bit about that in setting this context, because they really are just two different sides of the very human need to understand, explore, and express ourselves. So I'm going to start sharing my screen here. You know, like every educator, got to put a little PowerPoint slideshow together. And I just put as my first slide something that I thought, okay, let's see here. There we go. Was just beautiful. This is, believe it or not, a scientific drawing. And I will challenge you guys to tell me what you're looking at. Is it a flower? Is it fallopian tubes? I don't know. Maybe you know. Actually, I do know, and I will come to it later. But I thought this was such a lovely example of a scientific illustration, and I'll tell you about it a little bit later. So as I said, I think this goes back to the very beginning. I put Lascaux here because Lascaux is familiar to all, probably. If you're not aware, there have been a number of discoveries in the last decade, and we now have artwork that dates back 10,000 years at least in terms of representational art on cave walls of this pig in Indonesia. And even earlier than that, not representational, but just evidence that people were trying to express themselves on cave walls. You can also see at the tip, by the tail of the pig, the ever-loving hand that seems to have been a thing that happened across the globe simultaneously, or at least, you know, originally in different continents. You will often see this, you know, I was here mark of the human hand that wants to express our relationship to nature and place ourselves in nature. Of course, there are early representations, I think as early as about 15,000 years ago. Those other ones go back 45,000, 47,000 years ago, 50,000 years ago, actually, given the fact that we're already 2000 into the AD. Anyway, this is about 15,000 years ago, the earliest depictions of people in art on walls. And, you know, this is a little bit more recent. Again, an effort to see ourselves in the context. I mean, this is not maybe what we would call scientific, but it is what it does help us understand and place ourselves in the context of nature, of our activities, of our place in the scheme of things. Now, of course, for astronomical art, there are so many examples. I am not going to do a broad scope of that, but again, across the globe and throughout history, images of stars, suns, and moons can be found in every culture. And it was natural that people would use, you know, the very powerful images of celestial objects, the sun, moon, and stars, in their artwork, also because they were deities to most cultures. And so they were revered and represented, and again, spoke to the relationship between humans and nature, and sought to understand the human relationship to these entities in nature. Of course, there was some practical application in calendar keeping, and there was various ways of keeping calendar across the globe. But, you know, I think you have to say that this is pretty artistic in addition to being a way to measure and communicate the passage of time. So again, these people were more about the relationship, these drawings of people, but things, I'm going to fast way forward to the Renaissance. And of course, there's a nice difference between the painting on the left and the painting on the right. And I think this is what most people think about when they think about scientific illustration, is the effort to look more deeply and to communicate accuracy in representation. To say that what was the artist on the left was not being accurate, I think would not be an accurate way to describe it. That artist was describing man's relationship to, in that case, society. But of course, these drawings, as we all know from Da Vinci, very detailed, the musculature, all of it, in order to not only understand and apprehend the human body, but as we all know from the perhaps his most famous of these sorts of drawings, this, I want to say Vitruvian man. I almost said Venusian man, like Venus. Anyway, you know, again, finding the relationship between man and geometry, and by extension through mathematics to God. There was a commonality in that purpose. Now, there is a difference when we talk about science, you know, unless we want to say that no science existed before the 17th century, there was a shift in the way science and the way we think about science now as an enterprise that has associated with it a discipline of reproducibility, accuracy and reproducibility, which has changed the way in which we understand the universe around us. And this is, you know, has taken us to great places, and in many people's minds, perhaps taken us away from the artistic urge. But I would argue it's really quite the same, and I hope to illustrate that. These are drawings by Galileo, who's often credited as the sort of the father of really codifying this notion of how to go about a reproducible scientific exploration. His drawing clearly of the moon. And, you know, these are very, I would say, beautiful and emotional drawings, but they are also meant to show that the moon is a rugged physical world, not just a light in the sky. And it had meaning, which of course everyone probably knows led Galileo into some trouble with the church, but it had meaning in terms of interpreting our place in the cosmos. And saying these are just pictures of Jupiter's and its moons, but again, simple, you may not call it artistic, but with the power and intent of communicating, in this case, that there was another physical center of gravity, that the moons of Jupiter go around Jupiter, they don't go around us. And so we don't necessarily have to be at the center of all things. Now I'm going to fast forward to the 19th century and give a couple of examples because, of course, there was no photography. And so as naturalists and scientists began to catalog and understand nature around them, they communicated it best through drawings. Now this, of course, famously by James Audubon. And his drawings, as the time went on and over the couple of decades that he did these drawings, became more and more ornate, showing not just the birds, but also what they did. There's a great sense of movement and activity, and there's a story in his drawings of who these creatures are and how they live. I love this one because of it looks more like a tunnel. I guess it's an egg or a rock, hard to say what's going on in the lower right there, but there's a tremendous amount of artistry. And, you know, who's to say this isn't a work of art as well as something to communicate the nature of his subject. There's a great amount of discussion and debate about Audubon. I won't go into it now, but nonetheless, I think it has to be said that you know, his artwork was simply gorgeous. Now, I was going to say, and led to, of course, this is just as a bird watcher when I was a kid. I think a lot of scientists start with things like bird watching. But I had, when I found the Field Guide to Dumb Birds of North America, I had to put it in there because I'd never seen that before. This moves on into geology and geography. You might not think about it, but the Geological Survey expedition of 1871 to the West brought along painter Thomas Moran to capture and be able to communicate, again, to communicate to people the wide variety of geological, the diversity and geology of the American West. So, you know, his paintings, well-known, beautiful, emotional, and also well-known is the story that they led to the creation of the Yellowstone National Park, because people were so taken by this and realized, oh, we have to preserve this. So even our national park system owes its heritage to an artist who is trying to capture, as part of a geological survey, what they discovered in their exploration. Now, of course, they also a photographer also went along, Jackson. I want to say Henry Jackson. Oh gosh, I should have known that first name. But, you know, tell me about which is the more emotional, evocative painting or representation. There are a couple of side-by-side examples to show. This very famous one of the Holy Cross in the side of the mountain. Here's the photograph. Here's the painting. again, what the painter brings to it and through the individual eye of the painter is so much more profound. And I just brought this because one of his paintings hung in the Oval Office. Moran's paintings on the upper right there, you can see the 3 Teton Mountains and during the Obama administration. So, you know, this is a great piece of American history. Coming back to astronomy, also 19th century though, some of you may not be aware of Atien Truvalo, whose artwork I think is just breathtakingly beautiful. This is his depiction of aurora. We all know the northern lights or aurora. You can see the Big Dipper pointing to the North Pole star. So we're facing due north. I guess if you can see my little cursor, you'll see it kind of, there's the Big Dipper pointing to the North Pole star. But he had a position at the Harvard College Observatory. And in fact, he then was given a year of telescope time, which is great riches, from the US Naval Observatory in 1875 to go look through a telescope because his paintings and renderings were so magnificent. He did thousands of them. So this one I love of the planet Jupiter. And as I shared with the group before, it happens long before I agreed to do this that I have a face mask oh, here it is, of Truvalo's Jupiter and Truvalo's aurora. So I thought that was kind of fabulous. But you know, they're now represented, you know, much better known now, publicly speaking. But I love this because, I mean, that's not just a depiction of Jupiter. It also, again, has movement and motion, and there is actually a scientific story there, because if you look at the shape of the red spot, the big giant storm up here in the northern hemisphere, we can compare that to what we see today, and we can see the red spot is shrunk to almost circular. So even drawings before photography tell us, and it can be used to compare even with contemporary science. Here's his painting of Mars. You've got to love that. You wouldn't want to choose where to land a rover from this map, but it really captures what it feels like to look at Mars through a telescope and be spellbound by this extraordinary planet. He had a great fascination with the sun. I love this one of solar storms and prominences. He calls them protuberances. And this total eclipse picture, absolutely beautiful. He even has the little chromosphere and the solar storms coming off the limb of the sun. Just absolutely gorgeous. And this is what I introduced you with, his sunspots. I mean, those are sunspots, and if you've ever looked at close-up images, photographs of sunspots, you can see that they have that kind of filamentary structure. But again, the artistic rendering carries so much more emotion and information and experience with it. Now I'm skipping over all the, you know, because of the focus on science, I'm sticking with that, but who can not, as you're running through the 19th century, at least nod to Van Gogh. Also because it's the same purpose. It's his experience of when he regarded and interacted with the sky, which is the same for all of these. I want to come back to that notion that there's not, it's so much the human individual interpretation and experience. Watching that opening slideshow, I was thinking about this because, you know, given the subject, paint Mars, you all didn't paint the same thing. You know, each painting is so different and has such a different story to tell, and each is so personal. And that is as true with Van Gogh as it is with all of the artists that I've just covered from the 20th century, to 19th century. Now I have to come to the 20th century and just also mention Chesley Bonestell. If you're unfamiliar with his work, he posted this painting published in Life magazine, and it was, no one had ever seen anything like this. Imagine going to another planetary surface. This is obviously a moon of Saturn, looking back at Saturn. It's on Titan, and you know, transporting us through art to another world. And I think this has a lot of heritage for a lot of the work that we've seen in the exhibition from the California Art Club. But his paintings did more than kind of wow people. They also inspired people to action. His paintings of the moon captured the imagination of an entire generation. The idea that it wasn't just natural bodies, but also spacecraft like this rocket and this space station. And there are very few astronomers of that generation who lived through it, or people from NASA. They'll all, almost to a person, say that they were inspired from that generation by his series of paintings in Collier's magazine. And so it was not only just a cultural force, but it was also, in some ways could lead directly to the support for space exploration, which gave us landing on the moon and so much more. This is last one of his I'll show you because it's beautiful. His imagining of what it might be like to be on Saturn and look at Saturn's rings. And fast forward 70 years later, thereabouts, a little 60 years later, and this is not a painting, this is a photograph. We're able to do this now. We're able to take pictures from the surface of the moon, surface of Mars, and in this case, Saturn's rings from the Cassini mission. So I'm going to finish. Everything that you're going to see here is now a photograph, and I don't need to, or an image, I should say. I don't need to talk about the importance of taking astronomical images for scientific points of view. I'm going to finish just by showing you a slew of images that were taken for scientific reasons, but are so breathtakingly beautiful, I defy you to say they are not art. And then maybe that opens up a question. I mean, I've spoken very briefly about sort of how I consider science, that science is an exploration that now in contemporary times has the discipline of reproducibility and of making predictions that can be tested and communicated to others who can do those tests so that it grows and builds on itself. So same thing for art. Well, to my fellow artists here, or to my artists on this panel, what would you say is the criterion? So we have Saturn here. This is Jupiter, taken just recently from the Juno mission. These are publicly available images, but processed by a wonderful artist in the UK named Sean Duran. And these are images of the surface of Jupiter. How breathtakingly beautiful. And, I had to put in Pluto because everybody loves art. But, the space program, of course, Hubble too, absolutely breathtaking images of Hubble, brought to you by Hubble, of scientific import. I could tell you the story behind each and every one of those, but just to look at them for yourself. I do want to say that last year during the pandemic, sorry for the low resolution on here, we gave people, made some short videos to teach people how to download Juno images, download Hubble images, and process them yourself. So you can make your own beautiful images. And they're on the Griffith Observatory website, or the YouTube channel. So if you want to check those out, and we can show you where to get the data. And they're intended for people who don't know anything. So we also show you download this free image processing software and, that sort of thing, but it's kind of fun to do. All right. Lastly, just more images from the space age, which I hope will be a nice introduction to John. We've got, these beautiful images of Earth, all taken from space. Does that look like an abstract work of art, or is it fields of crops on Earth? Seriously, some of these are just in almost abstract paintings. I just, because of the Truvalo aurora, wanted to show you a photograph of aurora from space. So beautiful. Again, Earth from space. It's almost, you would not maybe know that that was a photograph. You might think that these were just artistic renderings. And of course, finally on Mars, we are fortunate enough to have images of Mars taken from orbit. And so I'm going to share some of my favorites. The face on Mars. Everybody loves the face on Mars, but I'm just showing you this to just be sure, in case you did not know, there is no face on Mars, but it's a marvelous illustration of how the change of technology improved our view. And as we went back each time and saw it under different lighting conditions, how we came to understand that it's not a face created by alien civilizations. It's just a mesa that happened to be lit and had low resolution imaging before, and this is what it looks like. You can tell your friends. So just a few more pictures from the NASA's high rise from the University of Arizona. If you want to look at them, I mean, you can spend hours, I mean hours, going through this website just looking at these images because they're all so breathtaking. But I picked out a few, again, with the spirit of, you know, these could hang on a wall as simply as works of art. These are dust devil trails on the surface of Mars. I'm sorry, I still get overwhelmed by them. I think they're just breathtaking. Mars has such a varied terrain. I love this one. It looks to me like ice cream and dunes, of course. I saw one of the terracottas go by. I thought of this image, knowing it was in my PowerPoint. That also is a work of art in many, many ways. And I am almost to the end. I hate to go through them too quickly, but I want to. Mesas and scarps on Mars. Now, of course, people have used imagination to imagine Mars in the past and imagination to imagine Mars in the future if we were able to terraform it and make it a water world again, a place that might be like our own Earth. This, by the way, is a real image taken by a NASA spacecraft of the surface of Mars, of the moon with the Earth behind. So I have one more slide, Gary, but I think you wanted me to mention this at the end, which is how to find Mars in the sky.
Yeah, we could bring that up at the end. That's
okay. We'll do that at the end then. And I hope that kind of gives a little bit of a sense. I mean, what I really wanted to convey was the lack of a strong boundary between the two. And so, you know, I think we all have seen the Mars Perseverance landing was an inspiration that I hope we'll get to hear more about from John.
Thank you, Laura. That was fascinating, completely fascinating. I know the images coming from Mars right now, I've been blown away by it. I've been grabbing them one at a time, putting them in a little folder. Let us talk to John Callis next. How are you doing?
Thanks, Gary, and thanks, Laura. Let me share
on us. I know
a
you've
presentation.
done so much work on the rovers that you are an expert. So I know you've got some amazing things to share with us.
But let me just briefly provide a synopsis of the exploration of Mars and how it's advanced over time. So this image here is Mars taken through a ground-based telescope. And for most of human civilization, this is all we knew about the planet. And this is how we saw the planet. But it wasn't really until the dawn of the space program that we got our first close-up look. And that had happened in 1964 with the Mariner 4 mission. And this is one of those images from the Mariner 4 image. And you can see it's grainy, it's black and white. You can make out some craters on the surface, but you really feel like you're looking through a very cloudy window at the surface of Mars and can't really tell what's going on. But Mariner 4 was just the beginning. We followed it up with several other Mariner missions, ones that went into orbit. And then eventually in the mid-1970s, the Viking missions. And here we see the introduction of color imaging. This is taken by one of the Viking orbiters. And you can see again the cratered surface, but notice the craters are eroded. So now this is a clue. This is telling us something is happening on the surface of Mars. And also notice that there's an atmosphere. It's a very thin atmosphere. It's only about 1% as thick as the Earth's atmosphere, and it's 95% carbon dioxide. So you'll need a spacesuit if you're on the surface of Mars. But the Vikings landed, and so now this gave us our sort of first human perspective of Mars, as if we were standing on the surface and looking around. And you know, obviously you see that it's devoid of the normal earthly features of civilization, living systems, forests, oceans, and the like. It looks very dry and boring. The Vikings attempted to search for life on Mars by taking samples of the soil and putting them into 3 different experiments within each of the 2 landers. Found no conclusive evidence for life on Mars. And that kind of threw a wet blanket on the exploration of Mars for almost 20 years. So it wasn't until the late 1990s that we went back to Mars, to the surface, with first the Mars Pathfinder mission, which you see here. And as I go through these images, notice the improvement in the picture quality, but also I'll explain the improvement in our ability to explore. And that's illustrated dramatically here by the presence of the Sojourner Rover that you see there in the middle of the image. Sojourner was a 6-wheeled, solar-powered, radio-controlled exploration vehicle, but it was only about the size of a microwave oven or a laser printer. So it couldn't go very far. It basically could only go about as far as you see in this image, and it was virtually dependent on the lander for communication with Earth. So it really exhibited the power of exploration with a surface vehicle, but also illustrated the limitations we had in this first step into that method of exploring Mars. So that led us to the early 2000s. This is the Mars Exploration Rovers, Spirit and Opportunity. And you can see here, this is a larger rover. So a larger rover can carry more stuff, more instruments, and it also can go farther. The ability of a rover to traverse is really related to the size of its wheels. A bigger wheel means you can go over bigger obstacles. So these rovers typically can go over obstacles about the diameter of their wheels. So I encourage you to do your own experimentation and take your car and see if you can drive over rocks the size of the tires in your car. Well, okay, maybe it won't do as well as a rover does on Mars, but it does speak to the advancement in the mobility exploration on the surface of the planet. Also point out that the white mast you see here on the rover supports 2 camera systems. So not only do these cameras sit at human height, so they give you that human perspective, they're also stereo. There are 2 pairs of cameras, each with a left-right lens. And so these cameras have depth perception. So it provides to the scientific community a 3-dimensional view of the surface, as well as adding in again another human aspect of this exploration, that you can see Mars in stereo. And I encourage you later on to go to the website that I'll reference, and you can download stereo images and use your red-blue anaglyph glasses that you can get pretty much everywhere and see Mars in stereo. So I'll show this picture, one of my favorites from the Mars exploration mission. This is taken by the Spirit rover, and it's sunset on Mars. And when you stare, you get that sense that you would staring at sunset here on the Earth. It's very emotional, very evocative. And so there are many similarities to our Earth, but there are also many differences. One of the striking differences is the colors are backwards on Mars. On Earth, we have blue skies and pink sunsets. On Mars, we have pink skies and blue sunsets. The other thing to note is you can see the sun here, and notice how small it is. Mars is further from the sun, about 50% further from the sun than the Earth. And so the sun appears approximately 50% smaller in diameter than it would if you're viewing it from the Earth. Laura showed an image like this, but this is the rover's wheel tracks. And I include this also because it has an emotion to it. It shows the loneliness of the exploration of Mars, but it also shows our record of exploration. We're leaving behind our footprints, if you will, or our rover tracks, if you will, as we explore. And it gives you this sense of a quest. We're on a safari or an adventure on Mars. We're exploring. But with the Mars exploration rovers and with subsequent rover missions, we can now view Mars on multiple scales. You know, Laura showed you some of the fantastic orbital images taken by the HiRISE mission, looking down on Mars. I showed you pictures taken from the surface as a human would see them. And now we can look at Mars as if under a magnifying glass. This is fine scale structure. These are small pebbles. This image you see here is only a few inches across the field of view. So you can see the rounded pebbles, which are very exciting because the only way you get rounded pebbles is if they get polished in flowing water, much like pebbles we find in the stream here on Earth. So this is evidence that there was flowing water on Mars at one time. But we are now on Mars again with more rovers. This is Curiosity, the Mars Science Laboratory. And this is a selfie that the rover has taken. So it has a robotic arm with a camera on the robotic arm, and it's pointed back at itself. And this is actually a mosaic of individual images, because you can see the black cutouts, which is actually missing data. And this has been seamlessly stitched together, but also geometrically reprojected to give you this perspective from the rover's camera on the end of the arm. I would characterize the Mars Exploration Rover Spirit and Opportunity as the robotic field geologist for Mars. Curiosity, I would describe as the field chemist on Mars. And if you look down at the bottom of the picture, you can see where the rover has taken some samples of soil and it has introduced those samples into instrumentation within the rover to do the elemental and isotopic analysis of Mars. Part of the evolution of the exploration of Mars has been we've established the physical habitability of Mars with Spirit and Opportunity. There was liquid water, there was energy sources, there was a thick air atmosphere in the past. Curiosity established that there are the building blocks of life on Mars, organic molecules, sources of carbon and nitrogen, which are essential for life as we understand it to exist. And so we want to continue that quest of searching for life on Mars because we haven't established it yet. And that is to move forward with continued exploration. This is a picture taken by Curiosity, a landscape of 4 frames. And, you know, to me, and maybe to some of you, you could think that this looks like some, you know, part of the desert of Arizona, for example, or other parts of the desert areas of the United States. So we get this very much human connection to, because we're seeing scenes that are familiar to us, even though it's another world. This is a more recent picture from Curiosity. And boy, don't you just feel like you could get out and walk around and climb around that cliff face there and see what's on the other side? It sort of compels you to explore further. But recently we landed again on Mars with Perseverance. Perseverance is very much like Curiosity in terms of size, but it carries a new suite of scientific instruments to explore. And one of the new advances that it carries along is a helicopter. And this will add an entirely new dimension to the exploration of Mars, because this will fly above the rover. It'll be essentially like a drone, if you will, and it will provide that totally different perspective of looking down and having those expansive views. So we're very excited to see the images that might come. And probably we're about a month away from the helicopter taking flight. And this will be significant for another reason, because this will be humanity's first flight on another world. In a sense, it'll be our Kitty Hawk moment for Mars. And so I think that'll be an exciting moment. It'll be a privileged moment, because we'll then all look back on that moment when we first took flight on another world, and it's something we'll tell our grandchildren about, that we remember that time. There's a phenomenal video of Perseverance landing on Mars, and this is just one frame from the video. So Perseverance lands with what we call the sky crane. It's kind of a jetpack that then lowers the rover down to the surface once it gets close to the ground. And if you look carefully, you can see not only the rover, you know, in front of you, beneath you, but you can see the ground, and you can actually see the thrust from the rocket engines from the sky crane blowing surface material, scouring it away as the rover touches down. And here we are on the surface. Recently, Perseverance did a test drive. So its cameras, which have greater capabilities still, showing the surface. And, you know, we just feel like we're there and that we could get out and walk around and explore. This is a zoom image taken by one of the capable cameras on the rover, looking towards this river delta, this ancient river delta that they hope to explore for signs of ancient life or even current life. There's a little scale marker showing this outcrop in front of the rover. And once again, we feel compelled to explore. We want to walk over to this thing and study it. But notice the hillsides beyond it that compel us to for further exploration. So we are just at the beginning at the adventure of exploration with Perseverance. So all these images, you can go to the JPL website you see here and follow along. And they have been inspirational to many, many people. And this art show that you've seen has relied on some of these images. I'll say one final thing about the importance of the artist, or something that the artist brings that you don't get from these images. And that there's an additional human element that can be brought into it. These images are taken in time. They're taken with a fixed set of camera capabilities. And what the artist can do looking at these images is they can bring the human perspective to this exploration by adding in the other dimensions, the dimensions of time and of color and of space. Because, for example, these cameras are very limited in their spectral response. They see very few colors, and we use those few color choices to synthesize the full palette of colors that the human eye can see. But in reality, it can't match the capability of the human eye in terms of those colors. So the artist can blend in, add in the missing information. These images are taken at a moment in time, and yet our world is dynamic. The surface of Mars is dynamic. And so the artist can once again bring in that dynamism that would be lacking. One obvious example is when you see a beautiful artist rendering of a seashore with waves crashing on the rocks, and we can then look at that and realize the dynamics and the time, and we can almost hear the waves crashing against the rocks. Again, the artist can bring that to these images and add in those other dynamic elements. So there's a magnificent partnership, I think, that artists can bring to our scientific exploration of the surface of Mars. And this exhibition that we've been part of is just a wonderful illustration of that. So with that, I'll pause and turn it back over to Gary, and then we'll go from Bill.
Thank you, John. That was fascinating. Every time I hear you talk about how we see on Mars, and
Gary, you have muted yourself somehow.
of course. Well, let me start again. John, thank you. That was amazing.
I thought it was just me.
Really enjoy it. What I was saying when nobody could hear me was that it always fascinates me hearing about how we see on Mars, and how the imagery we get is converted and transposed and put back together and pieced back together into these like beautiful images that, like you said, transport me and make me feel like I'm there. It's really amazing. So, well, let's move on. Bill, William Stout, our in-house artist, signature artist, William Stout, and award-winning William Stout. Tell us a little bit how you got into art. And I know I have some images that you want to share, and just let me know when you want to start sharing those. And
Yeah, well, let's see. First of all, boy, Laura and John, those were wonderful introductory talks. My talk overlaps a lot with Laura's, and so it'd be interesting to see where the differences are. So Gary, I'm going to say, whenever I say next, just hit me with the next image.
you got it. Here, I'm going to share
Okay.
now. So hold on.
Okay, great.
Okay, we're ready.
Okay, yeah, you can do the first image. So the earliest art was also a blend with science. Like a scientist, the cave artist carefully observed the animals he was depicting. He also had to be a chemist as well in order to mix and refine the pigments he was using. Later artists ground their own pigments and mixed them with egg whites to create egg tempera. One of the images that Laura showed was the silhouette of the hand. Now, as far as I know, those are the earliest images that we have made by humans. And so the actual first art tool was an airbrush, in that they would take a hollow reed and fill it with powdered pigment, put their hand on the wall, and then blow that pigment on top of their hand. When they took their hand away, they had the silhouette of their hand. Next. Next, Gary.
It's there. Is this not
There we
the
go.
image?
Okay, this is by Antonio de Pola y Uola. He was the very first artist to examine anatomy by dissecting human corpses. Next.
Wow.
Like a young medical student, Leonardo da Vinci also dissected human corpses to better understand anatomy and the functions of the human body. Leonardo is primarily known as a great artist, but he himself considered the science work that he did to be much more valuable than his art. Next. Next. So the Renaissance architect Brunelleschi is the man who invented perspective to create depth. And then he taught that to Masaccio, next, who became the very first painter to use perspective. This is one of Masaccio's paintings. And you can see that the depth that he created by the perspective behind Christ. Next. Because flowers and plants held symbolic meanings, artists like Botticelli here and Dürer also studied the science of botany to make sure their plants were not generic, but recognizable to their viewers. You can examine the flowers in this Botticelli painting very closely, and you can tell exactly what species he was painting. Next. Same goes for Dürer, who did this plant study here. Next. And around the turn of the century, Alphonse Mucha championed plant design motifs in his Art Nouveau work. Next. Now, I personally love doing paleontological reconstructions, as it calls into play so many different artistic and scientific disciplines, such as animal anatomy, botany, landscape painting, design, composition, color, perspective, and atmosphere. I stand on the shoulders of giants like the Czech artist Zdeněk Burian, whose painting is here. He's a painting of a dinosaur with some Archaeopteryx birds. Next. And the American muralist and painter and sculptor Charles R. Knight. Knight used to light the sculptures because he wanted the shadows of the dinosaurs to be as accurate as the dinosaurs themselves. Now, he was both ahead of his time and ahead of the scientists he worked with. His intimate knowledge of animals led him to believe that dinosaurs were highly active creatures, as depicted in this painting here. When he depicted them as such, he got criticism from the paleontologists of his day, who claimed that dinosaurs were stupid, slow, and sluggish. They forced him to revise his reconstructions to reflect their thinking. It was several decades later that our knowledge of dinosaurs expanded enough to recognize that actually Charles R. Knight had been correct all along, that dinosaurs were active and intelligent creatures. The smartest scientists I know recognize the value of having an artist on their team, as the artist often serves as a conduit to the public in clearly explaining, in a visual sense, the theories or information the scientists are promoting. Artists also tend to approach scientific theories holistically, avoiding the tunnel vision scientists can often have from working too closely on what they're studying. Next, please. Artists continue to affect scientific research. My talented sculptor friends, Stephen Cherkis and Sylvia Massey, were called to a dinosaur dig in Argentina, where paleontologists had discovered a strange new dinosaur. When the two sculptors got to the dig, their keen eyes noticed something. They immediately called a halt to the digging. They had noticed that the fossilized dinosaur still retained its skin impressions. 90% of the skin of this dinosaur, called Carnotaurus, was recovered because of their observation. From then on, paleontologists no longer assumed that the skin wasn't present in their digs. And because of that, dinosaur skin has now been found for all of the major dinosaur families because of Stephen and Sylvia. Next. There's in Moscow, there's a pathology sculptor. You can hand him the skull of any murder victim and he can analyze that skull and then accurately sculpt the features of that person. They've done double-blind tests with this sculptor scientist, and it's truly amazing. Now, this is a photograph of John Guerchie, a California Art Club member, and he is known for his prehistoric murals at the Smithsonian, but his big passion is prehistoric man. And so he traveled to Moscow and he studied under that scientist, artist who could recreate faces from skulls. And he studied under him, and his goal, John Guerchie's goal, was to do accurate sculptures, reconstructions of all the different prehistoric men and women that have been found. Next, please. In years past, we've had little knowledge of the surface of Mars. Edgar S. Burroughs set his John Carter novels on Mars, imagining a kind of crimson sagebrush covering lots of that red planet's plains. Next, please. Ray Bradbury imagined what colonizing Mars would be like in his collection of stories entitled The Martian Chronicles. The book Martian Chronicles was actually first written as a play by Ray. Next, please. Laura went extensively into Chesley Bonestell's career, and as she said, Bonestell was a huge influence on contemporaries who are studying astronomy and the planets. There's also a Czech space artist who is very similar to Bonestell. Next, please. His name was Ludek Pesek, and he created many well-researched depictions of space and our solar system. This is one of his reconstructions of Mars, what he thinks Mars would look like on the surface. Chesley Bonestell's map paintings were used in the film Destination Moon, and it brought the public a new, clearer vision of the surface of the moon. Next, please. Moon astronaut Alan Bean became the very first astronaut to accurately depict what it was like to be on the moon with his outstanding paintings that were informed by his own firsthand experience. I became friends with Alan, and he lived in Houston. Every once in a while, I'd get a phone call from him. And I got an interesting phone call one time where he asked me, he says, Bill, I'm trying to do this picture of what it feels like to be an astronaut on the moon, and I want to convey the exultant emotion of that, but how can I do that? Because you can't see his face because of the reflective nature of the helmet. And so my advice to him was, I said, go to your local comic book shop and pick up the collected Iron Man stories by Jack Kirby. Iron Man is a guy who's totally metal, yet Jack was able to convey emotions by the way he would pose that character in his stories. I said, so look at what Jack did and how he did that. The other thing I would recommend is, I know you have one of the space suits that you can use for reference. You're in Houston, that's a pretty big city, so they probably have a decent sized theater community. Hire one of the actors to put the suit on and have him act it out for you. So Alan was greatly relieved with this information, and he did just that. So I'm going to conclude now that when it comes to science, sometimes words aren't enough to convey the theories and the findings of scientists. That's when it is often time to combine science with art.
Well, thank you, Bill. That was
You're
amazing.
welcome.
Your Martian Chronicles, your John Carter, and your John Carter painting images are always just mind-blowing to me. One of these days, I have to pick up a couple of your books if I can afford them.
Yeah, well, you should pick up the Burroughs books too.
Yes.
Ray Bradbury was a huge fan of Edgar Rice Burroughs, and so was Gore Vidal, to my surprise.
Interesting. Yeah. I've read a lot of Edgar Rice Burroughs, different things, I guess. He also did like Tarzan and stuff like that, right? So,
He created Tarzan, wrote over 25 Tarzan novels, wrote 10 Mars novels with John Carter of Mars, wrote 4 or 5 novels with Carson of Venus, and interesting stuff. I worked on 4 different John Carter of Mars movies, but not the one that got made.
That's funny. Well, you did work on some amazing video movies, though. For instance, Pan's Labyrinth that we mentioned earlier. You work
Wonderful
on
film.
Conan, and of course one of my favorites, Masters of the Universe. I think you even did some stuff in Star Wars, a little work for Star Wars there.
I did the very first commercial exploitation of Star Wars. I did 21 Coca-Cola cups for Burger King.
Wow, yep, and I have most of them. What's funny is I tried to get recently.
Yeah, actually, a little horror film that I did.
What's that? Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say that I tried to get your Masters of the Universe figures that Super 7 put out recently, and they're already.
Oh, did
going
you get those?
There's a set of them 4, and they go for like $350 to $400 now. I couldn't even touch them yet.
Whoa!
Just so you know.
Wow, man.
And they're going up.
Well, I'm hoping they're going to do 4 more, because I ended up designing all the costumes and the characters for the film, as well as the film itself.
Yeah, I think we're looking. People want a few more characters. They, there's definitely we want a Tila, right? Anyway, let's get back to the topic at hand. So at this point,
back to Mars.
Yeah. At this point, I think we'll. If anybody has any questions, you can add them into the chat section down here. I'll try and pull some up, but we have some questions for discussion. So I really wanted to know a couple things. Let's start up with a quick question for everybody. Would you go into space? Like in a heartbeat, what would you be your choice? Laura, what would you?
Oh, yes, in a heartbeat. A little less adventurous now. I probably wouldn't. I don't know. Yes, sticking with yes.
Okay. Hey, John, how about you? What would you?
No, I have a different answer, because you go into space. One, there's a good chance you might end up with space sickness. Half the astronauts suffer from space sickness. 2, all the astronauts suffer from extreme lower back pain because of the weightless environment of the space, and that their muscles contract in the lower back, so they have back pain. And then going to the bathroom is really a challenge. So I would do one of those high altitude explorations where you're just up at the edge of space for maybe half an hour or something like that. They're like these high altitude balloon rides that they're proposing to do. That way you can feel like you're in space, see the Earth, the limit of the Earth from space, but after a while get safely back on the ground and have a good meal and a clean bathroom.
Now, Bill, I know you've been to Antarctica already. If those who don't know, Bill went down to Antarctica for a while and drew and did illustrations and painted and stuff down in Antarctica. Would you go to Mars or space and paint?
No way. I had pretty much my full share of life-threatening experiences living in Antarctica and exploring Antarctica. I did scuba dives under the ice and camped out in the dry valleys. And boy, I saw, well, the most extraordinary things I've ever seen in my life. It was like being on another planet. But boy, going to Mars, for one thing, the radiation would probably kill you. The other thing is something that John was talking about. The osteoporosis you would get without having gravity would just destroy your skeletal system. John, I wanted to ask you, what is space sickness? What are the symptoms? What is?
Oh, so it's nausea. It's I'm very susceptible to motion sickness. Like I don't do any of those fancy amusement park rides, but a lot of astronauts are test pilots, so you think they're used to this environment, but no, it's the body adjusting to the continuous weightless environment. But Bill, you do bring up a very good point that human physiology does degrade in the weightless environment, and we're trying to develop techniques to mitigate that. So long-term spaceflight is challenged by that concern. So it's never quite solved it, but we're getting close.
Mars is out of reach, in my opinion, for now. And I wouldn't do that either. But I've long wanted to walk on the moon. I think some of those early paintings probably got me. I just imagine it so clearly in my head. So I'm kind of in between because I'm not so interested to go. What I wouldn't do anymore probably is just go to low Earth orbit. But if you could send me beyond to the moon for a couple days, I'll take a vacation on the moon.
I would definitely
One of
easily
the
go.
questions I asked Alan Bean was, what was it like to walk on the moon? What's the surface like? Is it hard? Is it rocky? Is it dusty? And his answer really surprised me. He said it was spongy.
Huh.
I didn't expect that at all.
More like cheese, huh? Like we always
Yeah.
thought it was. That's
John,
hilarious.
I got a question for you. Our moon is so beautifully spherical, yet the moons of Mars are sort of like potatoes. Why is our moon spherical? Or I would think it would be more like the Martian moons.
Well, our
And-
moon was the result of a big impact with the Earth. And so that impact ejected material out that was able to coalesce in Earth orbit. And the radial symmetry of gravity allowed it, formed it as a spherical body, much like most planets. The moons of Mars are thought to perhaps be captured asteroids, and they're much smaller. So if we look in the solar system and we look for objects of different size, once it gets beyond a certain size, it's pretty much spherical. All the planets, and even the minor dwarf planets, which Pluto is now, are spherical, and that has to do with gravity accreting them. But smaller than that, they then can be irregular. So if you look at the asteroids, they look like, some of them look like hamburger patties or potatoes and other such objects. Mm-hmm. And so the moons of Mars are very small and have thought to have been captured. I don't know, maybe Laura can add something to that.
I was just pretty much the same thing, because it's also the rate of formation and the fact that a lot of those are differentiated, so that heavy stuff falls to the center and the lighter stuff is. But I was thinking about the asteroids and how many of them we're finding in comets that are actually sort of bowling pin. They clearly look like two lobes stuck together. And I mean, a lot of them are that way. And that tells us something about the history of the way they're formed as binary pairs that just coalesce and touch. So there's actually scientific information in the shapes of all these things.
And it's almost beautiful sometimes when the descriptions. So here's a funny question that just came through. Does space have a particular smell? Anybody want to field that one? John?
Yeah, it's, let me enlarge the question. What are the other senses that can be exploited in space? And no, because, smell is a result of chemicals, trace chemicals being transported into your nose, and, and they get transported by breathing. You sniff them. In the vacuum of space, there's nothing to sniff, and you wouldn't want to have your nose exposed to the vacuum of space. The same with hearing. You don't hear anything in space because sound travels through the air or through physical objects, like water or wood. So, if someone had a violin in deep space, you wouldn't hear it. And that's actually one of the challenges we had with putting a microphone on the Perseverance rover, is what would we hear? Because the atmosphere is so thin, its ability to transmit sound is very weak. And if people, you can go down and listen to some of the early recordings that have been released, you mainly hear the rover, the systems on the rover, but you do hear things like maybe wind buffeting. Yeah. And so it does add that extra human dimension, just like, adding sound to movies, we did, 100 years ago, really transformed the human experience.
I would also add that the Apollo astronauts, who after romping around the moon came back and were covered in dust, so the moon dust got into into the lunar module, said it smelled like burnt toast or burnt electrical wires, that it had a burnt smell, lunar dust did.
That's very interesting.
Once it mixed with the air. Because,
like once it started to oxidize almost. Or something. Interesting. Wow.
The other thing that cured me from ever wanting to go into space was watching the National Geographic series One Strange Rock. Each episode has at least one tale that absolutely terrifies. And I think in the first episode, they asked one of the astronauts what his first spacewalk was like. And he said it was a really interesting experience. He got outside of the capsule, and within a few minutes, he said it felt like someone had stuck a dagger in his right eye. And not long after that, his left eye was also sheer pain. And he contacted Houston. He said, Houston, I've got a huge problem. I'm outside the capsule and I can't see. And they figured it out in a very short amount of time. They said, here's what we think happened. Your tear ducts are constantly producing tears. And in a gravity situation, the tears will trickle down your face and they'll be gone. But you're in a no gravity situation, so it's just welling up. And so it's the highly salinated water in your tears that's burning your eyes. So here's what you need to do. You need to purge all the oxygen out of your spacesuit and get back in the capsule as fast as you can. And I was like, whoa, okay, that's it for me, man. No, and plus, and then seeing that Andy Bullock movie too, that really did it.
They probably should have told him that first and then given the long explanation after.
Maybe
Yeah.
part of training exercises. I don't know. So, you know, this talking about going to space and seeing, you know, how our physical bodies can get into space in the future and these problems we might endure. Here's a question that we have that what some of you might want to answer is like, what will the role of artists be like in the future of creating, say, environments, whether they're virtual reality or something, to share what we can find out in space? Because everybody won't be able to go to space, clearly, or it's going to be many, many, many years or decades or millennia before everyone is flying around space. So what do you think about?
Elon
There's a
Musk.
lot of, there's a lot of people, myself included, who have paid big money to do a virtual reality trip to Mars or the surface of the moon.
Okay.
I was just going to comment that Elon Musk has already sold a ticket to an entrepreneur and who wants to fill his spacecraft that's going to go behind the moon with artists for exactly that experience, to bring home and make human the experience of space travel. Just art, it's an art, literally an artistic mission.
Wow.
So, you know, I think that is, there is a huge future for it. And like Bill just said, you know, I didn't go in at all. I made the choice not to go into how computer generated art, and you know, it's just because it's just too vast. But you know, you get all all those data together, stitch it together, create a 3D environment. You can be there. I don't know if I mean, I have a 3D headset, and there are things I have to just stop because my brain believes it so fast. You know.
I want to try that really badly. I've never done that with the 3D headset.
John, have you used the virtual environment that the Mars teams use at JPL?
Yeah, I've had some early prototypes, and they keep improving that. Yeah, you wear a set of specially designed headsets, and you look around and you see things in all directions. And it has depth perception, and so there are objects, and you can reach out and virtually touch these objects in the field of view. For me, you know, I mentioned earlier that I don't do very well in emotion scenes, and so for me, it wasn't visually very comfortable for me to do it, but other people love that type of stuff. So I'm sure that technology will continue to advance.
Really quick, Laura, the Elon Musk trip, did you say, do you know the entrepreneur who's doing that with, or?
Yeah, name's not on the tip of my head, but it'll take me a second to Google it here. If you'd like, I'll get it. I'll go grab it.
Yeah, he's taking a whole group of artists, I believe. Yeah,
I don't think he's chosen them yet, and he got into a lot of trouble by basically also saying he wanted a girlfriend, to use the opportunity to get a girlfriend. People didn't like that. I was like, oh, that's creepy.
That's what privilege brings you, I guess. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Someone in the treat. Yeah, Maizawa. That's right. Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Well, there you go. So let's see. While we have you, Laura, what do you want to talk about a little bit how how we can spot Mars in the sky, and kind of what we could see from like an observatory like Griffith, or versus what we can see from our backyard.
There are separate experiences. One is just looking up and knowing what you're looking at when you look at all the dots in the sky. And this is another thing that I think is a bit of a misconception about science, is that somehow science takes away from the mystery or the beauty or the emotional experience of experiencing nature. But because you look up, there are a bunch of dots, what are they? But when you look and you say, that's Mars, and you know how, it's that far away, and it's, it's a world, and I know where it is and I can look at it, I think really enhances the experience. So I did put together just slides on a couple. Here we go. Let me just do my share screen thing. Here's where you will find it in the night sky. Oh, I have to hit share, that's why. It's right here. This is Mars, is drawn right here. This is the constellation Orion, and then the brightest star in the sky, Sirius. So if you go out, this is what the sky looks like tonight. You can see south is here and west is here. So if you just face southwest and look up, very easy to find is the constellation Orion. You always find it by the 3 stars across the belt, then the sort of box around it, the 4 very bright stars of his shoulders and knees, and then the sword hanging from, you can't really see the sword too well in Los Angeles, but just to help you, here's a little diagram of Orion and his stars. And so you look for Orion, here it is, the 3 stars. And there's a very bright red star here called Aldebaran, pardon me, which is the eye of the angry red bull. And right now, Mars is quite close to it. So you'll look up, you'll see 2 red things in the sky. Mars is the one on the right. So go take a look tonight. It'll be up, every night. It's getting kind of fainter and moving further towards the sunset, toward the west. But right now is actually a fine time to see Mars.
And Betelgeuse is a red star, right? But isn't it fading?
Oh, it went through, thank you. That's a very fun question. It went through a big brouhaha last year or 2 years ago. Who can time? What's time? That when it did fade dramatically to the faintest we've seen it in sort of, scientific records of its brightness, but it has recovered some. But that is because it's a star near the end of its life, and it's getting very unstable and going through episodes. It's going through some things.
I want to mention in regards to virtual reality, I was part of an experiment when I was working for Walt Disney Imagineering. The problem with virtual, back then at least, was the humans are so used to the details of life that computers can't compute fast enough to fill the imagery and make it stable. So a friend of mine came up with a brilliant idea. He said, what if we put people in a cartoon reality? That way people don't expect to see dust in the crevices and stuff. They just accept that they're in a cartoon. And a cartoon is much easier to generate quickly by a computer. So it can provide an incredible virtual reality experience. So they did that and they tested it out. They put, basically you were going to Aladdin's Baghdad and you were on a magic carpet. And you could fly down the streets, you could fly up buildings, you could fly over the city, you could go anywhere you wanted. And so they were trying that out with people. And a kid in a wheelchair who had never walked suddenly could fly. It brought tears to everyone's eyes. This kid was so excited. For the first time in his life, he could go anywhere he wanted. He could fly, he could go down streets, he could go over buildings. It was really, really extraordinary. And it's something that they hadn't even thought of until they were putting it through the beta process.
Well, this kind of, I think, opens up the door to something we absolutely don't have time to talk about, but the idea of, the merging of humans and machine and transhumanism that, we can, is that the future of humankind to basically be consciousness in what's a machine in the future and do anything because of the machines and the data can permit anything. It's a provocative thought, but
I do enjoy that topic as well, quite honestly, because it is kind of now topic. People are already starting melt or cross that line. I know I've read a lot about like near field technology and people getting a lot of implants in their hands to unlock locks or codes, key cards, just to do things. And it's really fascinating to me. It won't be long before we'll have our driver's license and our IDs and everything just implanted in a little chip in our hand. So we just wave.
We'll all have Geordie
I
eyes where we can see across
hope not.
outside of
I hope
just
not,
visible
too.
light.
It just doesn't feel that far away. So, I have a question for Bill. You were talking about working with, the virtual reality, and it came to mind that, you've worked with a lot of people like Disney and stuff. And I think of the rides at Disney, especially the newer, more virtual reality rides at Disney. Do you know, or have you ever worked with companies on doing it besides the one you just mentioned? Like, how do they employ scientists and different people in when they create those rides, or when they create these virtual reality experiences? I guess many of you guys might know as well. In respect
Yes,
to
they do.
the human experience.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Disney thinks it's really important to have outside consultants check their stuff for accuracy and also just to have them do a lecture to the employees, which might spark ideas and imagination and things they would not have thought of unless they'd had the scientific input.
I'll tell you, there's the one ride, Soaring across the world. I don't know if anybody's seen this. You sit on the thing and you've got the giant screen in front of you. I mean, it feels so real sometimes they have smells that come out to you. It's amazing. I can't wait to go to Mars virtually. If you can't get there really.
Yeah.
So I have a question for John. This one came in, somebody submitted this via email to me, and they want to thank you. Thank you, and they met you a few years ago. Her name is Jean, and her question is, for the artists whose work was not included in this most recent Mars exhibition, does JPL have opportunities for space-themed exhibitions? And if so, who would be the best contact for future consideration?
I really don't know. And part of that is we don't know what the things will be like after the pandemic, and whether we'll have physical interactions as we did in the past with the public, or whether more things will move to a virtual environment. So unfortunately, I guess I don't have an answer.
We'll work on that. We'll have to have one here at the California Art Club for everybody who wasn't involved in this one. We're going to have another one because we do have a virtual paint out on Mars coming up, and we'd love for you to take part in that. And we hope to, by the end of the year, maybe put together an exhibition of some of those works as well. So let's see, what else do we have here as far as questions? Laura, I did have a question. Somebody wanted to know where you got those fabulous masks that you were wearing.
I have to go look through my receipts. It was a website. If I get, to the person who asked, I will find it and I'll send it to you, Gary, and then maybe you could pass it to the person, or that person could contact you as well.
It was Beverly, actually.
Oh, Beverly. Okay. Beverly, I will find them.
Okay, let's see. Does anybody have anything else you'd like to share? I don't have any. No, I have one more person to ask a question. Let's see. Chuck Kovacic has an interesting question. I'm going to ask him to unmute and he can ask it straight up. Chuck, are you there?
Yeah, I am. Hi, everyone. Thank you for such a great and grand and wondrous program. And it's curious. We've been talking about the science fiction connections and all the wonderful connections that artists make. I have a slightly different connection. I'm a dedicated follower of Sherlock Holmes, and I was excited to see that one of the main camera systems, investigative camera systems on the robotic arm, was named Sherlock/Watson. And I posted on a number of Sherlockian Facebook pages, and the questions started flooding in. Why? What happened to the missing letter K on Sherlock? Why is Sherlock the first name and Watson is the last name? And probably most importantly of all, are there any dedicated Sherlock Holmes fans at JPL?
Well, let me take a crack at this. The name Sherlock is an acronym, and it stands for Scanning Habitable Environments with Raman Luminescence for Organics and Chemicals. So that's why the K is missing. And because they had the instrument name Sherlock, they thought, well, shouldn't there be a Watson somewhere? And so there's a camera called Watson that's part of that instrument. And so the name Watson is not an acronym. It's just labeled Watson because the main acronym is Sherlock. As far as do I know, I don't know of any Sherlockian fans at JPL, but undoubtedly there are some.
I'm sure they'll come out of the woodwork now.
Yeah, probably the most interplanetary experience I had was I got to ride with Galen Roll, who's a world-class photographer and mountain climber. He took me on a helicopter trip in Antarctica into the dry valleys to see something that's called the VX6 Falls. And we had the best helicopter pilot down in Antarctica, a guy named Bees Bonner, who used to fly Hueys in Vietnam. He took us down this corridor of valleys to just right before we got to the spot that we were going to witness. And there was a pinnacle of stone right in front of us. And he said, okay, are you guys ready? And we said, yeah, we're ready. So he moved the helicopter around the pillar, and suddenly we were being buffeted by these winds. It sounded like the bolts were going to be shaken out of the helicopter. But what we saw, it was sort of like the Grand Canyon, this gigantic wall that was sort of a butterscotch color, and falling over the edge of the wall was snowdrifts. And the wall was about 2,000 feet high, and the snowdrifts would pour down about 1,000 feet, and then the winds would kick them up into gigantic plumes. It's the most spectacular thing I've ever seen in my life. And after about a minute or two of this and us taking pictures, we would go back behind the pinnacle, and it would be calm and stable once again. So we did this about 3 times, and then Galen asked the pilot, Bees, he said, Bees, is what we're doing here really, really dangerous? And Bees was a master of understatement. He said, it's getting a little hairy. And at that point, Galen said, okay, I think we got the photos that we want. It's time to go back. And B said, that's a good call.
So I have another question really quick for all of you who wants to answer it. How can we get more young people involved with sci-fi, science fiction art and clubs like ours or anything? Anybody, any thoughts on that?
Man, that's a great question, because I'm a member of the Edgar S. Burroughs Bibliophiles. I'm considered the kid.
And you're
there's not a new group of young teens and readers coming up reading Burroughs' stuff. I think that branch of the literary branch is just dying out, sadly. And I don't know how to get kids interested. I mean, I got my own sons interested, and I'm going to teach my grandsons about John Carter of Mars and read them some Tarzan stuff too. But boy, I don't see that becoming a movement the way it was in the middle of 1960s.
What do you think, Laura?
I think young people are naturally very interested in this sort of thing, and I think it's the trick is to give them an opportunity to find each other and you know, honestly, I saw your art show, the youth show, fantastic. It's that sort of thing. You know, frankly, especially for young adults, and by that I mean over 21, not young adults like young adult books, you know, who are looking for trying to make a living. There's nothing like being able to maybe have some sort of endowed prize, setting up, establishing it so that it's every year or something, so people know that they can compete for it. You know, there are so many also digital artists, and I don't know to what extent the California Art Club is involved in that, but there are a lot of digital artists are also use more traditional, you know, painting and drawing and so forth. But their focus is on digital because that's where potential jobs are. That's, you know, for special effects and movies and TV and, you know, everything's digital in that regard now. So I think if that is a way to bring them to the California Art Club, and then, you know, they may find other places for their other talents.
So John, how does JPL bring kids into, even just into the technology? How do you work with schools, and do you ever, does art ever come into play in that respect?
Well, I think one of the best things that JPL does, I mean, that actually I would argue almost competes with our great missions of exploration, is that each year we bring in hundreds of student interns. During the summertime, we'll have as many as 800 interns at the laboratory. And it's a magnificent experience. The statistics I've heard is we end up hiring a quarter of these summer interns because they're typically college age, and we make offers to them before they complete their education. But what it does for all of them is it blows their minds, it expands their universe, it shows them that there are no limits to their imagination. And so even if they don't end up working for NASA, whatever they do, they have a larger experience, because a lot of these interns are not science, not STEM majors. They may be considering, pre-law or pre-med or accounting or history. And just to have their minds expanded by, the domain of possibilities is a really phenomenal thing. And the question of art, we actually have a group at JPL that does very much what we've been discussing today, which is finding ways to represent our scientific exploration in different modalities or different means to communicate the wonder, excitement, and importance of that exploration. And so it's a group that hires, artists that are very innovative to come up with these ways of, of communicating the story, telling the story. So yeah, internships are great. I think everyone should do them.
John, I had an internship at JPL, and the mission I was going to be on was canceled. And then my internship, I mean, I had been accepted for one when I was in college. Mm-hmm. Then that stinking Congress canceled the mission.
Darn it.
Darn it.
Speaking of iterating kids, and just Laura, you mentioned the art show. Just to bring it up, we do have a series of programming, this being one of them, that goes along with our exhibition, Mars, an artistic mission. And one of them is a student art competition that does have, we're giving away prizes with it. All the information is on our website. So if you know anyone, young kids, high school, younger, 18 and under, I believe it's 18 and under. I think all the details are on our website. Let them know, go to our website and to the Mars exhibition site, and all the information's there. So I'm gonna bring up Peter. Peter, you there?
Yes, I'm here, Gary.
I'm gonna ask Dan Cohn to unmute. We'll see if he can unmute again. And
Dan, are you still there?
He's here. Let's see if he unmutes.
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, great.
Peter, do you want to introduce him?
One thing before I forget, I want to say, Laura, you brought up doing virtual art, digital art, and that has not been part of the California Art Club. We usually work in paints and oils and watercolors and so forth. But I think we're going to make a concerted effort in the near future to start working digitally as well. Because of the school system, I think we have two educators in the audience, Christopher and Jennifer Bergen, and they both said that their kids need to work digitally. They're not even given in the school system oil paints or gouache or tempera to work with. They have to work digitally. And so I think that's going to be a very big push for the California Art Club and a different branch of the California Art Club. We have Mike Hernandez, who's going to be teaching probably in a month or two, isn't he, Gary? And I'm trying to get Don Towns.
It might be right after the gold medal exhibition. Probably.
Yeah, okay. Anyway, we're going to start offering classes digitally as well. And I know it's something I want to get a little bit more up to speed on. I know it takes a lot of practice and a lot of work to get good at digital art. And it's a sort of a different discipline, but I think we can marry the two. And it can be a wonderful, bright future for all of us. And so I'm excited about that. The other thing is that I know Dan Coyne, who's right here with his grandson. I think his grandson's 8 years old, who's watching today. And of course, he's involved with the Mount Wilson telescopes. And we want to try to set up programs when everything opens up there for artists up on Mount Wilson. And of course, the great Hale telescope that's up there, the big 100-inch telescope. Anyway, maybe Dan, you could talk a little bit about what you do and all of the activities involved with Mount Wilson telescopes and Mount Wilson.
Okay. Well, for one, the Hale telescope is actually at Palomar, the 200-inch. The 100-inch is sometimes called the Hooker telescope because Hooker donated gave the money to pay for mirroring the glass, basically. And my grandson is out of the room now. He's off, maybe watching Leave It to Beaver, I think, which I'm glad he's caught on to.
Yeah, that's a story.
But I'm involved in, sort of the cultural programs up there. Started the field trip program. We also do a concert series in the summer, which of course not this year, and hopefully, well, not last summer, but hopefully, still don't know, if we can this summer. But we hope to. Is still the issue of the observatory is closed due to the fire, for one. It's not the county. The road is up to there is open now, but the gates are still closed to the observatory. The county doesn't want. I mean, the Forest Service doesn't want people hiking in, which I think they're allowed to from the south, but they don't want people then going and continuing onto the trails that are on the north end. That's all the Bobcat fire area that they still keep, they want to keep an eye on and see what happens. But they're supposed to work on a map that carves us out and allows, as long as there's signage that, telling people not to go on those trails, they will anyway. We're not the police. But we are hoping we can open, and for at least for our own kind of groups or private groups, maybe not open to the public in general, but for events like something with the California Art Club. I mean, I'm thinking a day of plein air painting where everything is open, as well as inside the telescopes with, our docents there to answer any kind of questions. And
I would love that.
And whatever the results, we have an art show later, maybe combined with a concert. I don't, whatever, we can dream and talk about these things and maybe negotiate something with all the parties, including the Forest Service.
I like the way you think, Dan.
Yeah. If we just get 50%, make the plans as big as we can. And now, one thing I come to Mount Wilson mostly through I got interested in the plate collection at Carnegie and managed to talk my way into. Nobody was paying much attention to it, and talk my way into sort of spelunking down in those archives. And because I come out of my background is in special effects at a small sort of boutique kind of company, did light kinds of effects like transporter effects for Star Trek, and but I knew Con Pedersen, who was the guy who did that slit scan stuff in 2001, that very trippy sequence. Right. And I introduced him once to someone saying, well, this is the inventor of slit scan. And he said, no, actually, he got the idea from George Hale's spectroheliograph, which is, there is one up at Mount Wilson. So that's another artistic connection. You never know.
Right.
Anyway, that's that.
Well, thank you.
But there's a great history to the area up there on Mount Wilson. Can you talk a little bit about some of the history and things that were discovered up there, Dan or Laura?
Briefly, both of you. Yeah.
Each instrument, as soon as it was put up, made some major discovery. The first instrument the place was founded in 1904. The first instrument was the Snow Solar Telescope, which is a horizontal solar telescope, donated by Mrs. Snow, so not having nothing to do with the weather. And when Hale worked on that, he himself was still active, and when he found out about red sensitive film, he took that, painted some of that emulsion on a glass plate, took the very first image of the H alpha line, the hydrogen in the sun, which we don't see, directly. It was very soft, bad seeing. He took another one 2 or 3 weeks later, and which was actually very beautiful and very detailed, photograph in this case. And he saw this sort of swirling tornado-like thing and figured, well, there's swirling stuff, maybe there's magnetism, and so then he started looking for magnetism. There wasn't enough, it's not resolution, anyway, it wasn't precise enough, the spectrographic image to see the iron splitting. So the 60-foot solar tower was completed. This was in 1908. And on that one, he could, and they looked for magnetism in that area in sunspots, and he did find it. Now, he was wrong as to why it was there, but it could put him on the path to find it. The 60-inch nighttime telescope, which also went into service in early December 1908. The first image was taken by George Ritchie. It's a beautiful image of the nebula, the Orion Nebula. Amazingly beautiful photograph, and again, here's our artistry. He had taken pictures before, so he knew what he was doing, but he gets on the very first image that's taken on that telescope, a stunning image of that nebula, and he's getting it on the negative first time. He's not Ansel Adams, where you're in a dark room and you can dodge and burn and whatever, although Ansel Adams, negatives are also beautiful on their own right, but he's in there playing with it, and he wants something better. But Ritchie got it on the negative, first take, 4-hour exposure, Christmas Eve of 1908. But then on that telescope is Shapley. He determines that the solar system is not in the center of the Milky Way. We're off on the fringe, so it's a Copernican kind of revolution that happens. And then the 100-inch, when it goes into, Hubble, of course, we all know about Hubble and his discoveries there. The fact that the Andromeda Galaxy is beyond, not part of the Milky Way. There was debate at the time, and there were reasons for, there was evidence in both directions, and for those nebula being part of our Milky Way. The evidence, unfortunately, was wrong, but they didn't find out till later. But in any case, Hubble locked down, and with a lot of dedication, a lot of persistence and perseverance. I mean, he spent many months before he actually revealed the information or disclosed the information. But so that was his first major discovery. And then the second one, of course, was that the universe is expanding, that all these galaxies are flying away from each other or from us, and then from each other. So every one of those instruments is critical and important and historic in terms of defining the universe as we know it still.
Excellent. Thank you, Dan.
Can you explain to us about Michelson? Who discovered the speed of light up there? Isn't that?
He did not discover it. He measured it.
Oh, that's what I meant. Okay.
Yeah,
he measured it. Okay, I didn't know that. But
yeah. That's they had to determine exactly distance from the point on Mount Wilson to the point on, is it Mount Baldy or Mount San Antonio?
Yeah, this is the same. Yeah.
Where they beamed a mirror and they put a mirror and they had it beamed a light to there, and it came back, and they on this sort of spinning mirror. Anyway, I could not. Someone else could probably explain how that worked better than I can. But they had to know exactly that distance. So there was a long time surveying, and there's what is it called? Is it the pipe? There's a road. Is it the pipeline? No, pipeline is from another city. It passes. I mean, there's a road that goes out all the way to whichever canyon. It goes up to Mount Ball. Anyway, it'll come to me, maybe, this age thing. But the interesting thing, I don't know, Don Nicholson, who was the son of Seth Nicholson, grew up on that mountain, and would spend, weekends and during in the summer with his father sometimes, and, with the family. And he would describe when he was there when they did those tests. He was probably 7 or 8. And he would say there would first be a big siren that would blast to let the mountain know that they were going to do this thing. And then there was the spinning of this 8-sided mirrored contraption that I think is like 10 feet tall, and spinning it, I don't know how many thousands of revolutions per second, a huge noise. And then this beaming of this light of some kind of a Klieg searchlight, Klieg light, some powerful light that, into the mirror, into a mirror that goes to, sends the light to the Mount Baldy mirror and then sends it back. But it was thunder and lightning up on that mountain. It was kind of a Mount Olympus experience, I think, when I heard him tell me that story. And I think to be a kid and experience that must have been really something.
If I may, I'd like to just add that I don't think you can overstate the importance of that discovery because, or not discovery, but that measurement. And because the idea that the speed of light is constant no matter what frame you're in. I mean, they'd measured on one time going in one direction when we're orbiting the sun. 6 months later, we're going a different direction. And the idea was if there was an ether, there was a medium, then you'd get a different speed. And that has just undid and made the way for modern physics, for relativity, which, because you just could not, you can't mess with the speed of light no matter what medium you're flowing through or not. There's no medium is what you conclude. And it just changed our understanding of the universe, that the fact that space and time are squishable and fungible and not tick, tick, tick perfection and measuring sticks of exacting amounts, but that they change depending on our motion and whether we're accelerating and so forth. It's a huge discovery, and our entire modern life depends on it.
Well, I have one more question for you all. This is for all the panelists. And then we'll do some wrap up here. What has been the most rewarding aspect of each of your journeys? However your journey is. William, what do you think? So far, at least. Your journey's not.
The journey of as an artist, as an adventurer, I have a deep craving to learn. I love learning new things. I have a passion for learning. I read a lot. I try to learn from whoever I can. To me, it's one of the great joys of life.
Laura?
Mine's kind of the converse of that. I have a deep passion for teaching. And, to say what is the most rewarding, oh my goodness, I'd boil my whole life down to one thing. But, I remember in my years as a university professor, and just the complete joy and satisfaction of watching students turn on. And then, the same thing with the public and the broader, more public education things I've done, but it is deeply fulfilling to me.
John, how about you?
For me, and I'm sure the others agree, it's a journey that never ends. We are engaged in exploration, which is a very human endeavor, to learn, to discover, and it keeps going. And that's one of the really, truly remarkable and enjoyable experiences of this. It's a journey that never ends. It's the vacation that never stops.
Right. I hope I never stop learning, quite honestly. So.
It's true. As an artist, you keep ascending to different plateaus, but there is no end to that. And that's one of the great joys of art, is you're never going to know everything.
I wanted to bring up Elaine Adams, who is our CEO of the California Art Club. She just wanted to say a couple words to everybody, I think, really quick before we end. So, Elaine.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Elaine.
My good friends. I have to say, what a great way to conclude by talking about how you all enjoy learning and teaching combined. And I think this program is very much a combination of the two. And I really feel this program was so exciting. I'm glad we recorded this for posterity's sake. What this program tells us is how important art and science is together, and how art and science form and inspire each other. That's very clear. And another message that came through clearly to me is that traditional art is important, because although abstract may be very beautiful in some ways, it'd be very difficult to convey some of the many dimensions and aspects of science. And I just thought this program was extremely inspirational. One of my own favorite sayings of my own is that our only limitation is our own imagination. And the idea of growing knowledge and teaching that knowledge as it grows really expands imagination, and artists and scientists need each other. That came through very clearly. I just want to say thank you so much, Bill Stout, John Callis, Laura Danley. You three are such good friends of mine and Peter's and of the California Art Club. We are so honored to have you as members of the California Art Club and for sharing your knowledge with us. I hope we could do some more programs like this. I hope you could come back and visit us, do some more things. Yes, yes, and I want to thank our Director of Artist and Education Programs, Gary Spisak, for doing such a great job at organizing this program. And we're lucky to have Gary because he is an artist himself, a sculptor and a science buff. And I could see his passion in this program. And Gary, you brought together some very good questions. Well, and I hate to conclude this, Gary, I'm going to leave it back to you, but I wanted to personally say thank you. And I wanted to put some of my thoughts together on what I experienced from this program, and just wanted to express my own personal appreciation and for what you brought to the California Art Club members. So thank you very much. Wonderful people. Thank you.
Thank you. I think Peter wants to say something really quick, and then while he's getting back to his computer, we will.
Gary, before we take off, can I tell my favorite Mars story?
Oh, please do. Yeah.
Okay. I was working on a remake of the 1950s classic film Invaders from Mars. This was the mid-1980s. And we wanted the Air Force to be involved. And so we sent them the screenplay. The shooting date was starting to approach, so I was starting to get nervous because we hadn't heard anything back from the Air Force. So finally, I called up the United States Air Force. I said, are you guys going to help us out with the film? And they said, no, we cannot. We cannot help you. We cannot have anything to do with this motion picture. I said, well, why? You're the heroes. You're the good guys. You killed the Martians. You saved the planet Earth. What's the downside? He said, the official position of the United States Air Force is there are no Martians and there are no UFOs. I was like, are you kidding me? That's the reason? Oh my God, we are sunk. Well, our storyboard artist was an ex-Marine, and he handed me a card. He said, call this guy. And it was the name of the guy, and it said United States Marine Corps Public Relations Liaison Officer. So I called him up. He said, well, let me see the script. I said, you'll have that script within an hour. I'll messenger it over to you right away. And so we did that. This time I didn't wait. The next morning I called, I said, so are the Marines going to help us out with the making of our motion picture? He said, son, you will have the full cooperation of the United States Marine Corps in the making of your film. I said, so there's no problem with the official United States Marine Corps position on Martians or UFOs? He said, son, it is the official position of the United States Marine Corps that the United States Marines have no qualms whatsoever about killing Martians. True story.
They're like, bring them on, right?
Well, as a matter of fact, Gary, is that a Martian behind you? And where is his mask, by the way?
Yeah, we're we live in the same house, so we can be together without having a mask on. So.
When you were all asked that question about what's the most important thing in your life, and Bill said learning, and Laura said teaching, and I forgot exactly what John said, but I know it was very important. I was thinking the most important thing in my life is discovering beauty, and then trying to express beauty. And there's so much of the beautiful in outer space. So much beauty there that's so captivating. I mean, some of those photographs you showed, Laura, early on is just, you know, it's just mind blowing. And I just love, you remember Omni magazine many years ago, 30 years ago, they always had science fiction artists in it. I was always wanted to be in that magazine. And I just thought, because there's so much beauty of those images, but also not only just beautiful, but it captivates the imagination, and it spurs you to thinking as well. And so I think with the California Art Club, that's a chapter or an area that we should have a sort of space chapter that's constantly going out and trying to do things that have to do with science and have to do with other worlds and the outer space and the stars and the galaxies and our universe. And I'd like to commit to that now and see what we can do to develop that branch of the California Art Club.
Sounds good to me. I will send a letter off to Elon Musk right away. See if we can.
I know. I like the idea that California is going to claim space. You know, there's the San Diego branch. You know,
that's great.
We'll start our.
Yes, we'll make you our ambassador, Laura. And John, you can be the co-ambassador be co-ambassadors to space, our space chapter.
Thank you.
The
Peter.
final chapter.
Thank you, Peter.
You make it part of Space Force.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. We're gonna be Space Force now.
We can't end there.
We've had a wonderful time. We have had a wonderful time today, and I really want to thank from the bottom of my heart Dr. Laura Danley, John Callis from JPL, and William Stout, of course. I could hang out with you forever and talk about everything you've done, all of you. But I want to just thank everybody for showing up. This has been a wonderful time. We did record it, so as soon as I can get some things edited and up, we'll send a link out to everybody so that you can access it and watch it again. Don't forget to go see the exhibition, Mars, an Artistic Mission. Don't forget that we have a paint sculpt out coming up. There's a student art competition coming up. Next month, we have an art night here in Pasadena, and we're gonna have some of our artists from the exhibition, the Mars exhibition, painting live virtually. So that ought to be a really exciting thing. So make sure you keep an eye on our website. Also, for everybody out there, we have a discount in our bookstore right now. I believe it was at the bottom of the email I sent you. I believe it's 20%, but don't quote me on that. But there's a coupon code and you can get a discount on our books in our bookstore. So if you have any questions after this, please email programs@californiaartclub.org and I will get back to you as soon as I can. So once again, thank you everybody for being here, and thank you to the participants, John, Laura, William. It's been a pleasure, and we'll see you all next time.
Hey, thank you.
Thank you for the invitation. It was so fun.
We'll talk to you soon, everybody.